introduce Jared Christensen, the organizing curator for the presentation of this powerful exhibition here at UMBC and the moderator for tonight's discussion. Jared joined us as a gallery assistant in February 2022, and we are grateful for his keen curatorial eye and the production expertise that he's brought to the department and to this very beautifully installed exhibition. So thank you, Jared, and I'll invite you up to introduce our panel.
And thank you everybody for coming. So I will introduce our panelists, and then each of them are going to present on their various projects for 10 minutes or so. I have some questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience towards the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So first we have Lorenzo Steele Jr, an accomplished artist, author, and former New York City corrections officer who served 12 years in an adolescent detention center on Rikers Island. During his time there, Lorenzo captured some of the most captivating and graphic images ever taken behind prison walls. He took these experiences and in 2001, started a youth development program which provides workshops, training, and consultation to several New York City school districts. He's been invited to present his work at several colleges and universities and has worked with district attorneys' offices in Brooklyn and Long Island to provide awareness to at-risk youth communities. Lorenzo has received many awards from the Congressional Senate and States Assemblymen for his commitment to community service and dedication to children. He continues to use the power of storytelling through the arts to impact lives. Lynn Cazabon is an artist based in Baltimore, professor of art here at UMBC, where she's also the director of the Center for Innovation, Research, and Creativity in the Arts. She creates multi-part, research-based interdisciplinary projects centered on the intersection of environmental and social issues. She utilizes a wide variety of media and methods in her projects, including community collaborations, public displays, photography, virtual reality, web, and mobile device platforms, audio, and video. Lynn's work has been exhibited nationally and internationally in museums and galleries of public art and in solo and group exhibitions with the Museum of Contemporary Art, Bucharest, Science Gallery Lab, Detroit, Govett Brewster Art Gallery in New Zealand, 01 Biennial in San Jose, California, the Mattress Factory in Pittsburgh, and with the Art Embassy program, just to name a few. Oletha DeVane is an accomplished multidisciplinary artist from Baltimore who explored diverse political, social identities, and cultural interpretations. She's a passionate advocate for the arts education. Her work is featured in numerous solo and group exhibitions throughout the world, and she has work in permanent museum collections, including locally at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, which commissioned her to create a video installation documenting Maryland's history of lynching. She is a recipient of the 2017 Ruby Foundation grant and the notable Art Matters grant in recognition of her work involving communities for social change. Articles about Oletha and her art have appeared in Be More Art, Johns Hopkins University periodical, and the Washington Post. And she currently has a retrospective, The Spectrum of Light and Spirit, at the Center for Art, Design, and Visual Culture here on campus up through December 17th. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, make sure to get by and check it out. That exhibition features a collaborative project with our fourth presenter, Tadia, who's a multidisciplinary executive with more than 20 years of international experience in senior management and media, using design thinking and innovative business strategies. She's an expert in organizational dynamics with diversity, equity, inclusion, and cultural competence at the forefront. She's also a producer and on-air personality with the weekly radio show on the global digital radio station Woman Radio. Tadia has been honored by the City and County of Honolulu, United States Congress, California State Senate, the United Nations Association, and recognized as a Medalist of Honor by the prestigious Ellis Island Honor Society. So, without further ado, I will turn things over to Lorenzo to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Beth and Jared, for inviting me to this event. I'm honored. I'm gonna get right to it. My name is Lorenzo Steele Jr. I'm a former New York City Department Correction Officer. From 1987 to 1999, I worked in the infamous Rikers Island. I work with adolescents and adults. So any given day, one day you can work with adolescents, another day you can work with adults. I'm also a professional photographer. I used to take my camera inside of the jail as a photographer, taking pictures of detainees, structures, common areas, not realizing that those same images will be used later on in life after I resigned from the Department of Corrections to keep children out. I started a program called Behind These Prison Walls, where it actually documents where I went from a correction officer to an advocate. Many people ask, what was going on in your mind at that time that you made that shift. It was definitely enlightening. It was something that was never planned, but it's definitely a spiritual dynamic with me, because never in a million years did I think that I would go from an officer, being responsible for supervising detainees and to going to an advocate. But as a correction officer, I've seen a lot of violence. I've seen a lot of abuse from officers and detainees and inmates themselves. And I can only thank God for allowing me to be there to capture those images that will be and are used in public schools, in economically challenged neighborhoods, to show children the realities of incarceration. This is a picture of me in uniform, 1987 to 1999. This is a photograph right here of me as a prison reform advocate. I actually, let me make sure, double click. Okay, after leaving the corrections in 1999, I just resigned. I just woke up one day and I just said I cannot do it no more. But when I say that, there were several months that I'll never forget. It got so bad with me spiritually that I didn't even want to go to work. Imagine waking up and having to go to work on the 7 to 3 tour and sitting in your car until 10 o'clock, not wanting to go to work. So I really didn't realize what was going on, but God was shifting me to another place where I could share the information that I captured and experienced behind those walls. So after I resigned in 1999, I went immediately into the public school systems in New York City. I volunteered my time, I volunteered my service, just going in those economically challenged neighborhoods in New York City that the majority of the populations come from a particular community. Those are the communities that I went in. I started off with 12 images, just putting them on the blackboard at the time, showing children realities of incarceration. Those images and my personal story actually brought down the violence and the incidents within New York City public schools. So this is an image right here, sitting in an auditorium. There were days I would do assemblies in public schools, having 700 children in the audience without them talking for an hour and a half. And, the teachers and the principals just couldn't even believe that, their children could sit down that long. That's a picture of me right there with the images in Brownsville, New York. Brownsville, New York is one of the most violent neighborhoods in New York City. So imagine me waking up in the morning, putting the images in my van and laying them out on the sidewalk, because people in those communities are not going to go to the art museum. So I bring the museum and the information to the people. My name is Lorenzo Steele Jr.
Lorenzo Steele Jr., a former correctional officer, heads into some of New York City's toughest neighborhoods, armed with photos of life inside Rikers Island.
A lot of people in these communities don't go to the museums, so I bring the museums to the people, give them directly the information.
Don't become a drug dealer. Don't throw things at a teacher. Don't disrespect nobody. Become somebody.
I'm a former New York City Department correction officer. From 1987 to 1999, I worked in the nation's most violent adolescent jail on Rikers Island. I recently created a project called Behind These Prison Walls, where I use art to change habits and behaviors that could lead to incarceration. This unique program is actually on a school bus that I converted into the first mobile prison art museum. If you can imagine a museum that's mobile, that can go into communities at risk, public schools, colleges, and churches to bring education, information, and resources to those in need. When students step on this bus, they're going to experience the realities of incarceration. Life inside a prison cell. They're going to see what it's like to come through the receiving room for the first time. They're going to see shanks. razor blades, solitary confinement units, cells, and they're actually going to be able to research the history of the criminal justice system in America. If you look at the school bus, the dimensions are 16 feet by 7 feet. Half of that is the size of a prison cell. The goal of this program, behind these prison walls, is to raise awareness to gun violence, gang activity, and substance abuse use. Our main focus is to bring the consequences to individuals before they break the law. I know many may ask, why would a correction officer actually do something like this, create a program and a project like this to work with at-risk youth? The answer is simple to me. I've seen a lot of violence behind those walls. I've seen adolescents that were 16 to 21 years old that had their lives changed forever because of poor choices and poor decisions. And I feel as an artist, I have to give back to those communities, especially those individuals that are on the path of doing wrong things that could place them behind bars. It took me 20 years to put this experience together. Welcome to the bus. My name is Lorenzo Steele Jr. Okay, and just a little brief. I created a book, actually, what I use inside the same public school systems. Imagine sitting in the ISS room, like the suspension room, listening to children talk, their conversation going on, and listening to their conversation, I realized that there was a lot of information that these children did not know, and so I put this book together and I use it in public schools with the students, and I also have a workbook that goes with that. But I have the book here today. If anybody would like to, the purchase of the book is right there on the side. But I'm very passionate with what I do. Like I said before, God put me in that position to see, to experience, and what I'm doing now is just giving back and trying to stop another generation from going through the criminal justice system. Thank you. Okay. My name is Lorenzo.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about my project, Portrait Garden. So Portrait Garden is a metaphorical garden of portraits of 11 women incarcerated at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women, which is a multi-security prison in Jessup, Maryland, between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. The project used environmental stewardship as a tool for self-reflection through the selection of plants to represent each woman, and resulted in the co-creation of 3 perennial gardens on the prison grounds. Throughout history, deprivation has been used as a tool of punishment for incarcerated individuals. So contact with family, friends, and material pleasures is carefully monitored and controlled. And this also includes the deprivation of a connection to the natural environment, of direct experiences with sun, rain, wind, snow, plants, and animals and insects. So at the core of Portrait Garden was the premise that people are enmeshed within the natural environment in which they live, and that fostering responsible stewardship of that environment will lead to positive results for the physical, psychological, and spiritual health of those involved. So from the outset, I wanted Portrait Garden to enrich the lives of the incarcerated women I was working with, and also to improve the local ecosystem. This is a photo I took of the truck that I borrowed to bring the plants in the morning of planting the garden. So Portrait Garden came about after Chris Swan, who's a professor of geography and environmental systems here at UMBC, asked me if I'd like to join him and his PhD student at the time, Anna Johnson, in their work with groups of incarcerated men and women that they were training to assist with their research on biodiversity in the urban environment. So I said yes, and shortly after meeting the women that Anna was working with at MCW, I conceived of the idea of creating a series of portraits of them, but using plants as stand-ins for both poetic and practical reasons. So the project was built upon the ecological training that they were receiving from Anna, supplemented with information specific to horticulture and perennial plants. I chose to work with perennial plants for their cyclical growth habit, which echoes the process that I hoped the project would inspire in the participants. Internally, a continuous cycle of birth, growth, struggle, death, and renewal. I also wanted to use species that would visually enliven the drab and mostly barren prison landscape into the future. Plants that would feed the senses of the incarcerated women and the staff while also bringing long-term benefits to the local ecosystem. I asked each woman in the group of 11 to choose and self-identify 2 perennial plants, a shade and a sun species. And then I selected an additional native perennial species for each woman. I recorded audio statements with the women. And asked her to speak about why she chose a particular plant as a reflection of her. These statements included details about each woman's past, their life prior to incarceration, as well as their current life in prison. So I provided the plants that the women chose. There were a few exceptions. For example, one woman chose morning glory, but that was not allowed by the prison because it's a vine and it couldn't be accommodated in the gardens we were creating. Also, it's an annual, it's not a perennial. That was just a side thing. And most importantly, its seeds release a hallucinogenic compound when chewed. And so the the warden didn't like that. So we planted the gardens in fall 2013, and the following spring, I returned to photograph the plants as they emerged. In between, the women tended the gardens. This final display of the project consists of a collection of photographs of the cultivated plants, paired with recorded statements by each woman, and text in this case on these posters that I created that were meant to be installed in Baltimore light rail trains. The text is an excerpt from the recorded statements, and the QR code that you see plays the full recording. You can play that.
I chose the daylily in part because the daylily represents a lot of who I am. The fact that the plant will bloom and its bloom lasts only one day, but it has multiple blooms, so there's usually a bloom every day. But I relate that to me in that a lot of my incarceration has to do with my battles of mental illness. So there's a lot of myself that I'm not happy with, that I don't like, that I have tried to overcome. And I picture myself sometimes as a flower, and I'm in bloom at times, but then there are parts of me that I want to pinch off and get rid of. And so as the daylily bloom closes up and dies off, it makes room for additional blooms. And so I look at that and compare it to my life in such a way that as I am growing, I am pinching away some of the dead, ugly parts that I don't like about me, and it is opening windows and doors for me to bloom and become more of who I want to be, more the pretty plant than the dead one.
The public display in Baltimore light rail trains was designed to metaphorically bring the women into Baltimore, a city in which many of them grew up, and also to bring attention to the realities of long-term incarceration to the general public. The posters were displayed actually in the winter, so deliberately, so the images would stand out against the gray landscape of Baltimore outside the windows, and also would draw the eyes of the commuters. And also the place where they're put, of course, usually has advertising. You probably got that. I also displayed the project in January of 2015 at MCIW, along with also artworks by the participants. So it was a very short little display and reception for the women. I also have a book of the project over there, and I'm giving out free copies to anybody who's interested, who stays long enough to the end. Thank you.
Before Oletha and Tadia speak, we're just going to watch a short video that introduces their project, Beyond Bars.
Phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. Because I'm a woman, I say. It's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, and the need for my care.
Who are we? Do we stand to be corrected? Are we being rejected for the color of our skin? Funny, isn't it? It's funny how you let them through and push us aside.
Stripped as bare motherland. Gone is your pride by another's hand. Crossing oceans on slave ships. To the highest bidder, and your heart rips. You're begging and pleading your master's whips. Counting lashes, and your blood drips.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever had. Redemption song.
Y'all get the idea, right? First of all, thank you for being here. I want to thank my previous presenters here for sharing, because I think some of that work is so, so important. And to hear the voice of the young lady who was a flower, that's pretty amazing. I've known Tadia since I was 15 years old. This is my sister, all right? We've always claimed our relationship in that way. She has been a social activist as long as I have known her. And the interesting thing for me was when she was doing this project, she called me, she said, "You have to come to Hawaii." I'm thinking, sure. I didn't even know what the project was. It was enough to come to Hawaii at that point. But when I got there, my job was something that I totally never expected, and that was to go into the prison and meet the women that you just saw in the photographs and ask them to pose for us for what I call the Hecate pose, where you are looking forward, backward, and to your side. We had horrible lighting. So forgive whatever, Lorenzo, any photographic process that I used was just, fairly basic. But the idea was to meet these women and to actually talk to them and to figure out who they were, because that has been something that I've often thought about because of my own family. Tadia has been an incredible inspiration for this project, and she should talk about it. I wanted her to talk about it. It is in the exhibition that is in the Center for Art and Design and whatever. It is part of that exhibition, and if you go in, you'll get a more intimate understanding of who these people are, because we know that in many cases, there are things that are going on in their lives that we have no idea what got them there. And it's a whole issue around compassion. And many of you know that it's very difficult when somebody, if you go and see one of the people in this exhibition, how do we pull that part of ourselves into relationship to that person? I'm gonna let Tadia talk about the project because she was instrumental in pulling me in on this particular idea of beyond bars. I told her just now that I hated the music. But I love her, so go for it.
I'm very happy she loves me. I wouldn't want to be on the other end of it. I too want to thank both of you for what you have done and what you have shared. And I have so much more to talk to you about. Beyond Bars, Prison Women Speak was a 10-year project at the only women's prison in Hawaii. When I went in, I had no idea what I was doing. One of my friends was the chaplain. I met her. I said, why do you go in there? Why do you do this? Why do you waste your time? You know, these are throwaway people. They did a crime, let them do the time. They're wasting my taxpayer money. I did. I said that. She said, well, why don't you just come in and meet the women? I said, I don't really, it's not my thing to do prison. And so I went with her. And in that day, my life changed. And there was a spiritual awakening in me that said, you could be them. You could be here. One bad decision, and you would be them. And then I really had to think about what I would do. I said to her, well, what do they need? Why don't you give them what they need? And she said, they need education. They need confidence. They need training. I said, well, give it to them. And she said, well, put your money where your mouth is and you do it. Without thinking, I said, okay, I will. And then I thought, oh, what the hell did I just say? So I made a commitment and I had to act on it, and I really didn't know how. I'd already trained leaders and CEOs. I'd never trained prisoners. I'd never trained people, female felons. My life changed with this project. And as Oletha spoke about compassion and understanding, I had to really go deep inside and figure out who I was after getting to know who they were. So with that said, I spent 10 years eventually creating a dramatic performance that, as you saw, that was for Black History Month. We did 2 shows. They were broadcast on the public access stations in Hawaii. The women wrote their own shows. The women said what they wanted to do. Many were afraid to speak. Nobody wanted to be on camera. They were shy. They were afraid. They wanted to be anonymous. They didn't want people to know who they were. They were full of shame. They were broken when they got there, and the prison broke them more. And those of us on this panel know that. And so what do you do with broken human beings? When you realize you're broken, it's not so hard. So I then designed how to create a show for them to participate in. They were involved in every bit of processing, from lighting, from writing, from dancing. They choreographed their own dances. They picked their music. They created their show, and that gave them tremendous empowerment. And that was the point: build confidence, build self-esteem, develop confidence, so they would take the next step and go further in uplifting their lives, in preparing to leave so that they could be of value to their families and their children first, and then to society. So those 10 years were very full, very difficult. When I brought Oletha in as a guest artist, it was the first time ever that the prison, and it was the last time ever, that the prison allowed me to bring in a camera. And I'm telling you, we shot all of this in probably less than an hour. There's 5 interviews you'll see in the gallery at CADVAC. And we had to hurry because we knew the ACOs, the guards, were going to shut us down. They didn't want the truth told, and they didn't want us exposing all of the failures of the prison system, especially in Hawaii, which is a very different situation than continental facilities. It's state-run, it's not federal. It's poorly budgeted. They've actually cut the budgets 10 to 20% every year. When COVID happened, everyone got COVID. There was a horrible health non-response. These are women we're talking about. Women are very different than male incarcerated. Women have children. Women are women. Women have different health needs that men do. When you don't have hygiene products in a facility, what do the women do? When you have rape and molest as a common occurrence, what do you do? When you realize that the most valuable commodity in prison is a breakfast bar, you will barter your body for that breakfast bar because the food is so bad and you don't have breakfast bars, and they become very important. More important than cigarettes, more important than marijuana, more important than any kind of contraband you can bring in. Putting it in context. Now, after 10 years, we've just moved beyond bars into reentry. We're now a reentry program, and things will shift, and so we're involved in grants and funding and trying to get on our feet with outside the facility, because I couldn't take it anymore after 10 years. I do want to just share a few statistics to you, again, to show you how different Hawaii prisons are, and this is only pertaining to the women's prison. There's only one prison for women in Hawaii. They all go to the same prison. The facility is 72 years old. It's dilapidated. It is overcrowded, and it is deteriorating. It was built in 1950 as a youth facility. It now houses 258 beds for more than 300 women. These women are pretrial and sentenced, maximum, medium, and minimum. So custody levels, if you're familiar, A to D. The incarcerated rate of women in Hawaii for non-violent drug offenses is now outpacing that of men. The majority of women in Hawaii prisons are all of color. Very, very rarely do you see a white woman. African American, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Native American, of color, Filipino, everywhere from Polynesia. It's very different than being on mainland America. These women come in with cultural needs, often language barriers. And it may be for a small offense, maybe shoplifting, and they didn't know the value of what they shoplifted. Maybe they got in a car. Many of the women had second-degree manslaughter charges because they were drunk. And their friends were in the car, and they got in a crash, and their best friend, riding shotgun, died. So not only did they lose their best friend and the guilt that came with that, they get a mandatory 20-year sentence in Hawaii. Mandatory 20, don't care what you do, steal a car, shoplift, get publicly drunk, any kind of violation, 20 minimum. It's very hopeless for many of the women. Native Hawaiian women represent 44% of incarcerated women, yet the population is only 20%. Huge issue. Race is a deal in Hawaii. Maybe we look like a rainbow nation. Underneath, it's not. The dynamic of women inmates fosters rape and molest by male guards. Rarely do you see a female ACO, adult corrections officer. Intimidation and threats. There's a national PREA standard, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003. It is violated continually. And what do? They slap the hands of the guards. If they can prove rape, maybe the guard gets fired, but usually it's a boys' club all the way through administration from the warden on down. Women are not present in the administration. The risk of victimization and abuse is sky high. Women's health issues, from gynecological to anything that women deal with, is not met. It's a major problem. When COVID hit, everybody got COVID. And the ACOs, the guards, protested and filed union grievances because they didn't want to wear masks. And many didn't. And it was months of COVID before masks were mandatory. And in so doing, all the women got COVID. One died. In the men's prison, several died. That's another issue, but I won't address that. There's so little staff development and professional training for the ACOs. They don't know how to deal with women. They are men, and they're macho men. No offense, but macho men like to be in power and control, and that's certainly what guards have when they're in a facility of all women. Multiply that by poor employee morale, budget cuts, personnel aren't trained. The population profiles is that 80 to 90% of the women are mentally ill. They have long-standing substance abuse and addiction histories. So now, Beyond Bars is going outside to reentry. After 10 years, I know a lot of these women well. They get out. While I was in the prison, I was not allowed to see them, talk to them, know anything with their families. I would have been arrested, believe it or not. I would have broken a law as a volunteer, unpaid, in the prison. And so now, Oletha and I have decided we're taking it outside. We're going reentry. We'll give them more job training. We'll give them more opportunities. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be expensive, and we're facing that. But I never thought I'd be an artist or be in the gallery or be doing this with my sister, collaborating. But now that I am, I see the value of it. And that bus of yours.
That's fabulous.
Oh, honey, I got plans now. When our women go to the gate when they're released with no ID, no birth certificate, no bus pass, no money, and only the clothes they came in with, they need help. They've done their time. They've paid for their crime. There's no reason to keep punishing them. Punishing does not rehabilitate. Punishment only fosters more crimes. These women and their children will be your neighbors. They will be your relatives. It behooves the public interest to ensure that these women can become productive, tax-paying citizens and raise their children so that the children do not continue that culture of criminogenics, of criminal acts, of criminal consciousness. It's all about education, training, and acceptance. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay. She hates the music.
I have a couple that are directed, but anyone's welcome to add their thoughts if the question appeals to them as well. So first for Lynn, when I read through the book of Portrait Garden, I was really moved reading the various interviews, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a specific moment from one or more of the interviews that caught you off guard or that has stuck with you in the time since you did the project, and then also if you could give us an update on the project's impact, such as are the gardens still maintained? Have you stayed in touch with any of the women, et cetera?
Yes, actually the one that probably blew me away was Wendy, the one I played for you, and that's just a short excerpt of her statement. In terms of how seriously she took the project, how intelligent, articulate, and deeply moving what she said. I mean, I was just blown away, and I think in that moment, I really realized how the project was a reciprocal. There was an equal exchange happening in terms of what I was getting from what I was giving to them, and that was what I intended was to give them the plans and have them enjoy time outside. But then also there was just so much more that I learned from speaking to these women and getting to know them. And I was really struck by what Tadia said. I definitely had that same awakening in this project of realizing this could be me. I could be in their place just like that. I mean, it's they're no different than me. And then you asked about the afterlife of the project. Well, as far as I've learned, the gardens we created in 2014 they don't exist as such. Gardens change obviously, but I did learn that the prison did expand their gardening program following this work that both I and Chris Swan were doing with the prison. So they really have a lot more opportunities. A lot more women can be involved in the gardening. A few of the women have been released. 2 of them I've been in touch with, I certainly offered to all the women that they could get in touch with me, but 2 have sort of maintained contact and have been released. So.
So for Oletha and Tadia, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a bit more about the process of creating this production within the play, of like how the women found their roles. Was it sort of this organic process, or were they assigned roles, or just a little bit more about the logistics? And then also, similar to Lynn's question, like if you wouldn't mind sharing something that you felt was particularly noteworthy with your interactions with these women, or like one thing a little bit more focused that stuck with you.
You want to take it?
I'll take it for a little bit of time.
Okay.
When I think about the project itself, we had to go in literally under Tadia's direction, because she had set up a majority of how, moving past what I call the bureaucracy. Okay, so if I had to consider what was most important at that point in time, was how these women, in my introduction to them, it was just so heartfelt. It was one of those things where you had to, she's up here teaching, right? She's teaching them the various things about how to communicate, how to stand, how to accept who they were or are. All those things were part of that whole process, which I'm sure she can describe it better. But I watched all that, and I sat there in amongst these women as they were learning skills, actual skills of presentation. Because when they go out into the world, these are skills that they will need in order to be interviewed. So I watched a lot of that thinking, what is it that we want to do in the context of making it known, making these women known? And the idea of interviewing them was really important because, again, there you have the camera in front of you, right? And you have to verbalize who you are and where you anticipate going and what has happened in the past. And that was the structure. That was the structure that we used. I think that when I thought about how fast we had to do this project, because once you're inside, they really don't want any cameras in there. All right? That's not a place where you photograph anything other than maybe the food, I don't know. But there are no cameras. And we were really fortunate to be able to do that. And again, it's an incredibly bureaucratic process. So, go ahead.
Talk about low budget, no budget. No lighting, no prep, exterior noise. There was an incident going on outside of this room, and we had to actually cut off one of the women, who was the one in the gallery that people are terrified by, because she tried to kill her sister, and who was pregnant. And we had to rush. We had to try and get the women to say the things we needed. Oletha had the vision. I did not have the vision. I mean, I had the vision for what I'd been doing, but she had the vision of the Hecate heads. I didn't even know who that was or what it was. I think that, I was kind of known as the one to watch out for. The prison would treat me like an inmate, whereas the female felons were treated very badly as well, abused, hurt, hit. And I was threatened one day by a female ACO, the only one that was there. And she said, "Stand over there." And I said, "Why?" She said, "I'm going to write you up." And I thought, what? You going to write me up? I'm a freaking volunteer. Wait a minute, I'm doing this for nothing. So as it ended up, then as the project began to develop, we started making real interviews, supplementing what we could shoot inside with stuff we could shoot outside. All of the women touched me. One threatened me. I mean, it wasn't a piece of cake working inside of a prison. It was dangerous at moments. But you're so impassioned and devoted to help these women that you just do. And I forgot what you even asked.
Well,
Jared.
I thought about Dione.
Oh yeah, tell them about Dione.
Dione is
One of the videos in the gallery.
in one of the videos in the gallery, a transgender woman who,
No, not transgender.
I'm sorry,
Two spirit, actually.
what is that?
Two gender.
Two gender, but it's something you guys probably know. I don't know. I know she was intersex.
Intersex.
There you go.
Born with both organs.
And so she got thrown into the male prison, at one point, and she was raped and nearly killed. And she kept insisting, I don't belong here. I don't belong in this prison. She tells her story with such incredible light, which is why I wanted to use that video in the exhibition. And she's a singer, a performer, and if there was anyone that touched me, it was her, because her engagement with the whole process was from beginning about where she was, where she had, how she saw herself, and then how she transformed herself. And it's a really incredible process to see her come to that point where she is performing all over the country. She's a performer.
If I might just say, my one was Tiana, who's the first picture as you go into the black box room where the video is playing. Tiana has been in prison since she was 12. She came from a horrible family situation, juvie hall at 12. She never got out except for 2 years. In those 2 years, she ran. She got caught again. She ran again. She got caught again. On an initial short charge, she has done 9 years. The girl didn't even know who she was. No education, because not everybody gets a GED in prison. She was 12. She was stunted. Her ability to see the world and see herself was as a 12-year-old. She had 3 children. All were taken away from her. She is now out. She just had a baby. She lives with her father. She's pulling her life together. The baby is disabled. She is devoted to helping this child, and she is in a relationship with her girlfriend that she was in prison with. Even though after she got out, she got involved with a guy, got pregnant, had a baby. Very common that this happens. So the whole gay issue in prison with women, the lesbian thing, there's no generality there. It's very conditional, very conditional. So Tiana is like my child. She's the one with the tattoos on her neck and was in gangs at 12 and just lost her life then, and now she's regaining it. And Beyond Bars is going to do everything they can to help her.
Lorenzo, a lot of the language that you use when you talk about your work, it reminds me of the DARE program that I went through in school, probably about the same time that you were starting your program, and I would classify that as sort of like a scared straight approach. And as someone who grew up in suburban northern Utah, like the kinds of violence that they were using in these programs was so far removed from the world I live in that it was too much to have an impact. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about your approach and maybe how it's adapted and changed over the years that you've been working with people as sort of a response to the impact you're seeing.
Good question. A lot of people, in the beginning try to label it as a scared straight program, but I basically I supply and inform and give information that can help you make better choices and better decisions.
Can you use the mic, please? Thank you.
Yes, my program basically provides information that can help you make better choices and better decisions. It was never meant to scare. At an early age, I was always a reader, so I knew a lot. I knew more than others, and they always say information changes situations, and information gives you power. So imagine talking to 700 children in an auditorium, then asking them the question, how many knew this information before me, the facilitator, gave this information? They didn't know. So that's my reward when I talk to them. I don't get into politics, I don't get into color. I just share with them that, for every decision that you make, there's a consequence. For those who have low-level reading scores, there's a consequence of that. Many people don't even realize that the 3rd and 4th grade reading score determine how many prisons they build. The prison system is a business. For 12 years of my life, when I put that uniform on 2 times a month, I was getting a check because somebody was coming through the receiving room of our facility. My brother retired at 25 years old. As a sergeant in the NYPD, he was getting the check 2 times a month every time he put on a uniform. So, we have to, I share with them that, and not just children, but just educators as well, because they don't even realize that, if we can't reach these children at a young age, we're almost assisting the criminal justice system supplying the next generation of prisoners. God works in mysterious ways. You got to be careful what you ask for, because I'm a dean in a charter school, dean of, guess what, discipline. So now when a student acts up or is having a bad day, guess who's responsible for suspension? So I know the consequences of suspension, and especially people of color. So now I'm sitting back and say, wait a minute, I know this child is going through some serious issues, and I'm that individual, I'm not an educator. And so now I'm coming into an environment, not an educator, but I got information that these educators don't know. I said, listen, we have to find resources for these children. My school is from K to 12. And so now, instead of just suspension, I found resources in my school, in my community, that if that child is having a bad day, we can refer that child to that service. And so, like I say, God works in mysterious ways, but it's just information. It's if you get scared, good. Be scared enough not to go through that system. But it's just more information that I pick up just reading a book and then cast into a system I knew nothing about. Growing up, I turned 57 in July, and nobody in my family has ever been incarcerated. But 22 years old, I met the necessary requirements to become a correction officer, and I didn't know anything about jail. So imagine 22 years old, 157 pounds, going through a system, But spiritually, I was supposed to be there because spiritually, my mother was the person that carried the camera in my family. I had to go back and say, wait a minute, I'm a photographer, I'm doing shows, exhibitions. When did I touch the camera? At 5 years old. My father played professional softball, and my mother would take the pictures when we was on, his tournaments. So I can remember at 5 years old going into my mother's closet, picking up the camera. It had the big flash bulbs,
Right.
giving up my age, clicking it. I could still hear it going off, clicking. So this is a spiritual journey that I'm on, and I had to meet my parents because my mother was the photographer. I had to go through that system to get the information that never in a million years would I thought I would go into the public school system in New York City. I had to teach myself how to be a vendor. I didn't know what it meant to be a vendor. I was just going in there volunteering my services to try to, give back. And then somebody said, do you realize you could be a vendor and be a consultant for the largest school district in the United States, which is the New York City. And so, that's my journey. And believe it or not, the bus, I just completed that about 3 months ago.
I think it's fabulous.
That's an old project. My new project is to create something like this, and I will, which will be the first prison art museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, where families could come in, children can come in, people that are going through substance abuse could come in and get the necessary information that can help them make positive changes in their life.
Lorenzo, you're my example of the right black man. I'm telling you.
Can I say something about journeys? We are all on a journey.
Yes.
We're all on that.
Everybody's on a journey, whether you're in or out of prison, whether you're incarcerated or not. The reality is that as people who are successful, whether you're a student or a professional, you're not in prison, you have power to affect change. The prison system in America is so horribly broken, is so bad. We have the highest rate of incarcerated people in the world, and we're supposed to be the number one, blah, blah, blah. It's up to all of us sitting here to be proactive when you see a petition circulating about prison reform. If you see a meeting in your neighborhood about prison reform, or whether or not they're going to put a prison in your area, whether you meet someone who was in prison at one time in their life, be proactive. Don't be afraid of this. We have to change the system. Nobody inside can do it, I can tell you that. Not even ACOs and wardens. They can't even do it. The U.S. Department of Justice needs to hear from citizens who have said, we've had enough. We're not buying the stereotype that all black men are absent fathers. We're not buying that all women are prostitutes. We're not buying it. Offer rehabilitation. This is what is the last thing on the minds of prisons, is rehabilitation. In my view, I think a prison should be a hospital with a college in it, or a high school in it. There are so many mentally ill people in prison, it's not changing factors in their lives or ours. They aren't getting fixed. They aren't getting help. They're not getting healed.
And they're paying for everything they get.
Yes.
Everything. The tampons.
Yes.
All right.
Phone calls, $5 a minute.
Phone calls, everything.
It's exploitation of the most vulnerable people outside of being a disabled individual on the outside, and we have disabled on the inside who have died. I mean, there were 3 suicides in the 10 years I was at WCCC. And why were they suicides? Because the women were put in an air-conditioned room with a hospital gown, a mattress with no sheets or blankets, and nothing else. No TV, no nothing. Doesn't exist in Hawaii prisons. It isn't like federal private prisons. This is like the minimum you get. And if you are already depressed and you've already been in a confrontation and you get punished for a confrontation or punished for whatever. One of my girls was wearing lipstick. They put her in solitary. They put her in the cage, and she she wanted to commit suicide. And the girls that did, they hang themselves with a bra, they hang themselves with a sheet that's put out at night for when they sleep in an air-conditioned room where they freeze. They can't talk to anybody. If you really believe that the guards and ACOs watch people every 15 minutes, no, they don't.
You sleep.
They don't. They're
They're
playing
sleeping.
games, they're
They sleep.
sleeping, they're doing whatever. When you're in prison, at least in the state of Hawaii, there is no internet, there is no cell phone, there is no communication with the outside world. Rarely is there TV to watch only certain things. So know that, yeah, people have done something wrong or bad. It may not be as bad as it's made out to be, frankly. I mean, shoplifting is okay. Shoplifting, you shoplift, okay. Pay for it. Find a way to pay for it. Don't go do 20 years, in a dilapidated facility where you eat nothing but carbohydrates 3 times a day. No snacks, nothing healthy. Nothing healthy.
I want to be sensitive to our time and make sure that we've got some time to mingle afterwards, but does anybody in the audience have a question, general or specific?
So I so appreciate everybody's sharing everything, and what you said, we have the power to get involved. So I'm a musician, I teach here in the music department, and I would like myself as well as my students, our students in the department, to be engaged in some way. What is all your advice on for us on how to get started, and maybe things to keep in mind as I'm in the planning stages, but any wisdom, advice you could share, we appreciate it.
Can I say there was at one time a program in the prison for the arts. And there were poets who went in to teach poetry. There were performers who went in to teach acting. There's several prisons that are still doing that. And so when I think about the arts and its ability to reach others, to me, that's where you begin. So you don't have to carry a camera in, but you can carry yourself in with your talent. That's it.
Great answer.
I would say, despite the bureaucracy that you will face, and you will, your governor is married to First Lady is an artist herself. I think that if you put together a program that you come in weekly and you all have to be approved, and they won't let any young people in, if you have something that is skill-based or skill set development, you could help maybe teach guitar, maybe give guitars to the prison and create the program by giving the guitars. You can't do piano, you have to do ukulele or guitar, something very small that you can carry in. They may or may not let you keep it. Think it through first. Talk to former incarcerated people. Ask them what they might like to have had while they were in, because that then gives you some credibility to develop your program and say, we spoke with 10 formerly incarcerated musicians. They said they would have loved to have da-da-da, because it would have helped them develop better communication skills, or it would have helped them mitigate their anger, or impulse control. Impulse control is the biggest deal that inmates face, really, they do. They don't have it, it's just what it is. So what will help impulse control? And the issues that felons need to overcome. So that's one way of approaching it. Do your homework.
Let me just add something on to that. That was a great question and answer. Find individuals that already done it. There's something, they say there's nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
There are artists that have been inside facilities. Research those programs, how they did it, modify it, create your thing, and just go from there.
I'll give you my card and I can give you the research I did on all of the art programs going on in prisons around the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Why don't we close things up here? There's some refreshments, we can mingle a bit. Something that I've been thinking about in this process that I just want to close off with, I suppose, is the Prison Nation debuted originally in 2018. the print issue and the first iteration of this exhibition, Aperture Foundation. We were originally scheduled to have it here in 2020, and now we're finally exhibiting it fall 2022. And in those 4 years since, there's been this explosion of conversation, the way we talk about policing and prisons in this country. And so I just think that's something to think about, the sort of enduring importance of this project and how in many ways it's only become more relevant in the 4 years since it was first displayed. And the organizer, Nicole Fleetwood, if you're interested in this project, her current project is called Marking Time, and it's sort of the next evolution of Prison Nation, where she's gone from working with artists more on the outside to working with artists on the inside and exploring this, how even in such a restricted environment, the creation of art continues to be really prominent. And that ties into kind of what Lorenzo's working on with this prison art museum. So just some thoughts to close things out with. Thank you all so much for coming out, and thanks to the four of you for sharing your projects with us.